Good evening and happy Monday, everybody. I hope you all had a blessed and sanctified weekend, worshiping our Lord and giving Him glory for all things. And we've made it again to Monday night. I hope you all also have been able to recover from the silliness with the clocks. And, you know, been thinking a little bit about stories and the Word of God. I'm specifically been chewing on the line, initially from the Old Testament and then repeated by Jesus in his temptation in the desert that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes forth from the mouth of God. Jesus, uh, using our experience of physical hunger and our physical nourishment to point out that there's a similar pattern going on with our spirits. And I think if we take that seriously, then what we can find is that we will find people who are spiritually hungry, and then people who are also, spiritually satisfied. Not that anybody in this life is ever satisfied, such that they don't want any more, but perhaps they're not starving from hunger. And what does this living by every word that comes forth from the mouth of God, what does that look like? Um, and I think the simplest way to explain this, there's complex ways to explain this too, which perhaps you'd find helpful. But the simplest way to explain this is seeing, everything in your life as being a part of the story that God's telling. If you are living on the Word of God, if you're feeding yourself on the Word of God daily, if you are, really connected to the biblical story, as we find ourselves in the middle of it, in between Christ's first coming and Christ's second coming, then you'll begin to, perhaps this takes a while, but you'll begin to, see how every detail of your life and every little facet of your life, and, perhaps even the things that aren't going so well, is actually related to our Father in heaven and how his providential guidance and care goes over all things in the world. Uh, so that's what I consider this to mean. And, there's probably more to the meaning of this idea that man does not live on bread alone, but by every word that comes forth from the mouth of God. But, um, I don't think that that is the only way that our spiritual hunger can function. We have the capacity to eat spiritual, nourishing food, healthy food, substantial food, but we also have the capacity to eat spiritual junk food and even indeed spiritual garbage. So maybe some of the lies that we tell ourselves, or that we've been tricked into seeing about, this or that belief, this or that practice, this or that relationship, things that are not healthy for us. Maybe we can see that as spiritual junk food. We're not eating the things that are really good and uplifting for us, but are rather, eating things that won't ultimately satisfy us in a good way, that will leave us hungering for more. And if people are really starving, right? If their lives are bereft of meaning, then they won't just turn to spiritual junk food. They may very well turn to spiritual garbage, spiritual things that are not useful and good for them. And so I want to, imagine that it's 20 years ago, 25 years ago, actually, 25 years ago, about 1999, 2000, 2001, that era there. And, if you remember that era, I have vaguer memories of it than some people listening. You remember that The Matrix came out. The Matrix is an interesting film. Friend of the show, Mark Lefebvre, over at Navigating Patterns, he's got a 2-hour breakdown on that. I'm just gonna focus in on one little thing. But before we get to that, You know, if you're really feeding on the Word of God and you watch a movie like The Matrix, um, you watch it when you're not spiritually starving, let's say. Then it'll be an interesting movie. You could appreciate, the cinematography, the choreography, the acting. It's a certainly was a novel setting for the time. The idea that there were people plugged into a computer simulation there. Um, so I think a lot of, we'll say, Christians, right? Christians who saw themselves as a part of God's story, who saw themselves as uh, uh, a part who feed on the Word of God. They watched it and they just kind of appreciated uh, some of the things they could appreciate for it, but it didn't really change them. Didn't really they didn't really feed on that story. They were already full up on the Word of God, and so there's no room for that. So as a young Christian, right? I think I maybe got to see The Matrix in 2003 or 2004. When I was old enough to watch a rated R movie and get away with it from my parents. And it didn't really change any of my fundamental beliefs. I thought that the idea that there could be people living in a computer simulation was interesting, but I just knew that wasn't how creation worked. And me being in middle school by the time I saw this, I probably couldn't have articulated it in an intelligent way. But I'm like, that's not how it works. I know how it works. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, so on and so forth. But let's say that you're actually spiritually starving. Let's say you're actually so hungry that you may feed on junk food, or you may even feed on spiritual garbage. Well, I think that idea might get into you because if you're really starving, it's not starving like your body's starving. Very very few people are capable of ignoring their desire for physical nourishment for long, but spiritual nourishment, well, the body can tick on for a while without much meaning or purpose in life. So you'll just go looking for it everywhere. You might even look for it without thinking that you're looking for it. So you're just living your life, and there's this idea that you know maybe we're actually living in a simulation, and it's such a good simulation that we never really see it. And even when it glitches out, we just say, "Oh, that was deja vu right there." Yeah, maybe that's actually how it works. And you know, uh, I've heard that science explains everything now. Um, so even if it isn't actually like a computer simulation, that's actually a very realistic thing that we could do. We could, actually model the entire universe based on our mathematical knowledge. We couldn't do this with the computer systems that we have now, but probably someday with Moore's law continuing on, uh, we will continue to build more and more powerful computers. And one of these days somebody's going to come up with a unified theory for physics where general relativity and quantum mechanics meet, and strong nuclear weak nuclear force embrace. Um, so yeah, that's actually probably how the universe works right there. That we could actually simulate everything in the universe, and then all of a sudden you're an atheist. You're an atheist just like that because you were spiritually starving, and something which, even though it is actually garbage, filled your soul at least for a little bit. That began to speak to you. And what do we see just a few years after the Matrix comes out? And Matrix comes out, it is a phenomenon, where it made millions and millions and millions of dollars, and everybody was talking about it. Well, all of a sudden, Richard Dawkins is selling books, Sam Harris is selling books, Christopher Hitchens is selling books, and that period right after the Matrix came out was the peak of the wave of the new atheist movement. How many people? How many people were spiritually vulnerable because of their severe starvation, spiritually vulnerable to being tricked into feeding on spiritual garbage. How much of that played into Richard Dawkins' book sales and cultural prestige? I don't think those things are unconnected. And if you don't believe me, let's see if we can try that trick again. There was something else that was huge in the 1990s and the early 2000s. Early 2000s, that was Harry Potter, the Harry Potter books by J.K. Rowling. Um, now, as a child of that era, and as a person who enjoys reading a fair bit, see all of the book clubs that I've been involved in, uh, I read the Harry Potter books over and over again, and I really enjoyed reading them. I felt like this was a good use of my time as a young lad with hair on the top of my head and not on the bottom. Um, and that it didn't really affect me that much. Like I didn't have any fundamental change of beliefs. There was a little twinge of disappointment on my 11th birthday when I didn't get the Hogwarts letter, but it was quickly and easily forgotten about. I didn't really expect it to happen. It just was, the slightest twinge of disappointment. But we can imagine that there are people who are really engaged in this story. In this story about people who have a secret identity and who can speak magical words that change the world. And maybe that's what really begins to feed you. You begin to feed on this idea that, yes, really and truly, I have a secret identity that nobody else can see, but it's true for me. And if I but speak these magical words, then I can actually change reality, change the world just by speaking these magical words. And so the Harry Potter fan, encouraged by a little group of Harry Potter fans on some forum in the internet, that early 2000s internet where they would congregate and gather, declares to the world that I am in fact a woman. Even though I was born male and I was named Harry, I am now Harriet. And this is me exposing my secret identity to the whole world and changing the very structure of reality by speaking these words. Now, I don't have the slightest inclination to believe that. I was never in any spiritual danger of falling into that. I've got other spiritual dangers that threaten me, and I pray to the Lord to be delivered for them and do what I should to try and avoid it. But that one in particular, didn't have any effect on me, despite me having read the Harry Potter books over and over again, despite me eagerly anticipating books 6 and 7, because I was a little too young to have read right at the beginning, but I was caught up by the time books 6 and 7 came out and read them quite hungrily because it was entertainment for me. It was entertainment for me. This was not something that was, feeding my soul. It was ultimately just something that was filling my time, and it's good to fill your time with something. And if you're living by every word that comes forth from the mouth of God, uh, a lot of these things aren't really going to affect you all that much. But if you are not feeding on the Word of God, then then you might eat spiritual garbage. And something like that might happen to you without you even noticing. So be on the lookout, be on your guard, and make sure that when you're choosing the spiritual table to dine at, that you choose wisely. Mark is once again pointing at the recession of the church, and I am quite painfully aware of this, and we'll see what we can do about it. But before we get into that, let's say hi to our guests. Mark, friend of the show, is here, and Kirk, friend of the show, is here. How are you gentlemen doing tonight?
Um, I've been some.
I'm afraid that you're not coming through clearly, Kirk. You might have problems with your microphone right now.
I got a new phone.
Oh, you got a new phone. Well, hopefully the microphone works better from here on out.
Okay.
That was that was excellent, Father. I took notes. I'm like a little bit in shock right now, so you'll have to bear with me. Like, wow, was not seeing anything this good. But
Well, that
good.
was an excerpt from the talks I gave on the retreat 9 days ago that I was leading.
I like I as I'm sure you know, I like the idea of a void or a gap or a vacuum that gets filled. So that was really good. Feeding soul versus filling time that's gold. And I saw you had a little chat with Father Stephen DeYoung, and I must say that was also excellent.
Oh, like on Jacob's channel a year ago?
Yeah, somebody clipped it out, just a piece of it, and just that piece.
Okay.
And yeah, I saw that because I hadn't seen it before, I guess, which is not too surprising because I don't watch any of Jacob's stuff anymore. But yeah, you did such a good job with that. And then we were sort of discussing it on the Discord because we all watched it together. And I was like, yeah, I know. These legalists, these fundamentalists who do this legalism nonsense. It's no good. But Father's on it. He's on it. So I feel like a double dose of you top of your game today, just for me. So it's quite good.
On the topic of legalism, Father, do you think this whole forced pronouncing is an extension of legalism?
I mean, I don't know. That's even beyond legalism. That's just kind of straightforwardly tyrannical.
Well, but it's propositional tyranny fundamentalism.
Yeah.
Legalism is a specific form of fundamentalism. That's just run of the mill bog standard fundamentalism with propositional tyranny because books say so, and words are magic, and Harry Potter says so, and you had a little Leviosa, and you're all set, right?
Yeah, I found your point about the unification interesting. That some physicists are thinking that they're playing God, basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's ultimately kind of there's an excellent doodle. It's a C.S. Lewis doodle out there. I think it's called "The Myth of Science," and it's about 30 minutes long. It's on YouTube, and when we're done with this stream, obviously, that is a useful thing for you to look at. The Myth of Science, and he makes a very compelling case that there was a myth for some of this, overexalted scientism. That you usually, people who are like serious scientists, they're usually a little bit more humble. Like the trouble with the experiments and the data, they'll just say, look, like we know a few things, but there's so much that we don't understand, and that actually makes them a little bit joyful versus kind of the Redditor IFL Science T-shirt wearer who has just this myth of scientism without actually really regularly practicing science in any form whatsoever. It's just kind of pop culture garbage there. But I do actually want to take this question here in the chat. I want to ask, I am a Catholic hoping to be received into the Melkite Church. I want to ask, how do I reconcile my Byzantine view of liturgy with the Novus Ordo Mass? So it's interesting that you're popping, we'll say, churches sui juris, if we're going to use the appropriate canonical term there. So I'm assuming when you say a Catholic, you want to be received. You're a Latin Catholic, and I just want to make sure before I ask go any further, the Greek Melkite Catholic Church. What do we do about the Novus Ordo Missae? Because it does seem to conflict. So, background for anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about: the Novus Ordo Mass would be a colloquial way of referring to the Reformed Roman Missal that was issued in 1970 and has been kind of the standard in Catholic parishes all across the world. It did mark quite an abrupt and noticeable change. When people think of Vatican II, that's the first thing they think of, because the Catholic Church's, the Latin Catholic Church's most visible form of public worship uh, changed fairly dramatically, basically overnight. And there's plenty of people who are on traditionalist side of things, and traditionalist, it's got kind of a spectrum of opinions there. Some people who just maybe want to patch up a few holes in the Novus Ordo, but otherwise it should be good to go. Other people who have serious, reservations about it and think that the old ways are pretty straightforwardly better. And other people who think that this is a much smaller, more schismatic idea, that the introduction of the Novus Ordo Mass shows the invalidity of the Catholic Church because it isn't remaining faithful to the Catholic tradition. That's not an opinion that I hold. Obviously, I celebrate the Novus Ordo Mass more frequently than I do the traditional Latin Mass, because even though I do have some questions about it, I think that it's more important that I be useful to my bishop, and he expects me to be a dual threat priest, both old and new forms of the liturgy there. So, how do we reconcile this? I think the most important thing to remember is God's supreme providence in history, in the history all throughout the world, that there is no part of creation which God is not governing according to his goodwill and his good pleasure for us. And if we look throughout the church, we see these crises and catastrophes happening all the time. I think especially of the Arian crisis in the 4th and 5th centuries AD. And the majority of the world's bishops at that time taught that Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, was a creature, that the Word was created in time and was not co-eternal with God. And if you paid any attention whatsoever in your catechism classes, you'll know that that's not the Orthodox faith. We'd say that the second person of the Trinity, the Word, is God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, consubstantial with the Father. Through him all things were made. So that's a little bit of the Nicene Creed there. But a majority of the world's bishops actually fell into the Arian heresy, and it took well over a century, even after the Council of Nicaea, well over a century for the Orthodox faith to be firmly secured. So, sometimes even within, the Ark, floating around on the stormy waters, there's infighting among the people who, sometimes are doing their best and are just kind of dumb, and other times are wicked and disobedient. And it's not necessarily up for us to be able to fix all of this and judge all these things all by ourselves. So I think the most important thing is that the church has faced many crises in its time, and because she has the blood of Christ flowing through her, she is strong and is made stronger the whole way through her history. So, not to be flippant, but what I would say is try not to worry about it.
I'm not worried about it, Father.
I'm glad you're not worried, Mark. It's
That's all that matters.
yeah.
Fog? Testing.
Yes,
Testing.
Kirk. What's going on?
I don't see my thing popping up. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you now.
Okay. For some reason, the thing's not showing on my end.
Okay.
I was just going to ask: is there a potentially bad faith actor in the background?
Kirk, I don't ever need you to worry about that, all right?
Okay.
Yeah. It's just we'll vet these folks as they come in and keep a look at on them.
Okay.
Um,
I was curious how your Sunday was, Father. Did you have a good Sabbath?
I did. So the confirmation season has begun for me and the uh, bishop. So we have uh, lots to do, and so we did 2 confirmation celebrations this weekend, and those are it is what it is, right? It tends to be a lot of work and starting at the worst possible time, and God's just going to take care of everything. But He may, the Lord may be taking a little bit of work off my plate so that uh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just answer this question right now since it's now public. Kirk is on here like every week. I know who Kirk is. He has permission from me to not show his face just because we have a more personal relationship. We've spoken more than once. You, Mr. Wasteland, I don't know you yet. And, if you're not comfortable showing your face on the internet, there's actually plenty of good reasons to do that. But I, have dealt with trolls enough on this channel, and even if they are going to troll me, I would like it to be the case that before they troll me, they show everybody their face before the bad stuff starts flying. So that's just the way that I run my channel, and that's the rules. Here we are.
Yeah, I know certain people don't like rules. I
Well-
usually label them bad faith actors, and everyone gets upset, but I'm always right. So,
Well,
could be a coincidence.
these are them's the rules of the channel, and this is how I operated. And there's a StreamYard referral link right down in the description here, and there are free tiers of StreamYard. And so if you want to run your own YouTube channel with your own open StreamYard links, and if you want to let every troll and porn bomber on, then be my guest. You just go ahead and let her rip. That'll be your channel and not mine.
Yeah.
It's I just did a live stream on cooperation, which got delayed due to a day and a half long internet outage. But yeah, it's interesting to me how easy it is for me to spot, bad actors, and everybody else is, I don't know how you do it. I'm like, cooperation. If they don't cooperate, it's automatic. You already have your answer, right? And it's not necessarily a malicious thing, right? Like, some people don't know how to cooperate, but the result's the same. And me being a pragmatist, I don't care about the why. It doesn't matter to me, So yeah, you always run into that, but they're really easy to spot. I know people struggle with that, but I learned a lot from that stream and questions, and the
I wasn't on
interaction.
it for very long. Did the party go on a long time without me?
It did. We even had a lot of curiosity about whether or not you understood some of the points in that particular stream, which
I didn't see the
found
whole stream. I was I kind of tuned in at about 6:45 Central, which was like 7 o'clock, 7:45 your time. So
Yeah, so you missed. Oh, that was a long ass monologue. That was
it
a bear of a
was.
monologue.
It was.
It was hellish.
Well, yeah, you did it to yourself, man.
I had no idea people didn't understand the difference between obedience and cooperation.
That's
Never occurred.
something. I think Catholics might use the word obedience differently.
Well, Catholics might, but again, it's obedience, and while being obedient can be done as the result of a cooperation, obedience is not cooperation. Otherwise, it'd be the same word, and you wouldn't need to. The language is really easy, and I think people really struggle with language, and I don't know why, because I'm like, kind of answer.
Yeah, I mean, we could. It's interesting. So cooperation is, that's got Latin roots, right? And you're doing an opus, you're doing a work together, right? So
Together,
yeah, together, yeah. And then obedience is ob audire, which is paying close attention to somebody, that you're listening really hard. So that's it. So I'll tell you, I'll just tell you what Father Battersby told me in seminary, right? And he's now the Bishop of La Crosse, so he couldn't have been that wrong. That obedience, doesn't mean a slavish obedience. That part of your obedience is informing the bishop of things that you think are important, and making sure that he's aware of your situation and your opinions about a parish assignment, ministry opportunities, what's going on here, there, and everywhere, and what you think about that. This idea that you're cooperating, and then he's the authority with the responsibility. And then when he's considered these things, if he gives you a lawful order, that means it's final, and then maybe you can talk to him a little bit, maybe explain things. But if he says, I've discussed this with you, and this is what we're doing, then it's like, okay, I've made the promise of respect and obedience to him, and so I'm going to go do that. So that was the way. And if it's not a lawful command, either if it doesn't follow proper canonical form, then you can have recourse to the apostolic see over that. Or if it's immoral or unjust, hey, burn these files.
That requires obedience, paying close attention. To decide not to comply, which is why we have two words. Words are not the same. Like, if they're not the same, there's a reason for that in English. Maybe not other languages, but in English, there's an actual reason why the words are not the same. So you don't have to comply if you're obedient with something that is not correct. Like, that's true, right? But that has nothing to do with cooperation, where there's two people operating or more, right? And that's part of the problem, is that,
I mean, it's like your operations at different levels of the hierarchy are going to be different, even though you're striving towards the same goal.
Right. Well, the problem is the equality first attitude. When you have this equality first attitude, everything gets completely screwed up and really badly. But just the number of people that don't see contradictions. So I was watching a video on music, right? It was a YouTube channel, Rick Beto. Good stuff. He's got a Wakeman interview, by the way. I'm sure
I saw the Rick Wakeman interview.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed it.
I figured you would, of all people. I might waste my time on it. But I randomly, I don't know why I do these things, because I don't listen to anywhere near all of his stuff, but occasionally something catches my eye. And he was talking to this random friend of his who's a technologist and musician, and they were going into, well, you really should do music as a hobby, and you shouldn't try to rely on it for money, and blah 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 blah. And they're chatting away about, I did the math on the and he did all this research apparently, and I kind of believe him. He probably did do all this research, and he said, if we just taxed everybody at a really reasonable rate, that and then just give them free media, the artists would make out like bandits. And I'm like, so you want the patronage system back, but because we don't have a monarchy, the patrons are bureaucrats, right? So the patronages has been replaced by bureaucracies because of the change in governance from the medieval era, right? And like people don't understand it. And Sally didn't understand this either. And she's like, I didn't think of it that way. And I'm like, well, when you're paying taxes for a common good, that's managed, that's patronage, that's what it is. And if the patron is gone and replaced by a bureaucrat, well, I mean, that's what we're stuck with. And then of course, as Sally points out, like it doesn't work. Like whole countries have done that for decades. It doesn't produce better art, right? It's just a theory by the artists that it would, but that theory turns out it
a bit of a self-serving theory, if you ask me, because like if so, I've actually like considered, sort of, and of course it would have like a monastic arrangement to it, but like like a house for artists to, if they could get through the uh, auditions, and they sign up for the rule of life, and a certain amount of obedience to the rule and to the prior abbot, moderator, whatever you want to call the person who's in charge who makes the decisions. That would be like an interesting way of doing things. But I've always imagined that there would be like a monarchical structure to it, perhaps with a board of directors or a council of advisors, however you want to look at that. That maybe needs to be consulted on certain issues, and privately funded, not publicly funded. That would be the only way to make that work, I think, because you need to have like somebody with a vision who can tell the difference between like, something that's pretty good, something that's really amazing, and something that's just crap. And this guy's, this is just another Yoko Ono who's really just pretending to be sophisticated, but they're just kind of,
Well, it's interesting too, because they went into more like fundamental contradictions, right? From not understanding what was going on. Like he gets into this whole thing where it's like, oh well, if we kind of wrested the music away from the from the people that were running it before, and now it's it's Napster, right? Which is the great pirate. This is when piracy, as an electronic piracy, comes into the mainstream as Napster. So I don't think anybody.
It definitely had nothing to do with people with tape decks recording mixtapes off of the radio.
I know nothing about that, Father.
That's not piracy. It's only piracy when it happens over the internet.
That's it. Yes, exactly. So then he goes into this whole spiel about piracy. He says, well, I wonder where piracy comes from. Now, keep in mind which channel this is. You're familiar with the channel. Right? And he says, well, I suppose, Martin Luther. And I was just like, it's like somebody shot me in the head. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? How did this topic, go to Martin Luther and come up on this channel? This is insane. Right? This is just crazy how everything's just.
Like, since when does Rick Beato talk about Martin Luther? Right?
But with his buddy.
Is he gonna have like, Gavin Jordan B. Cooper on to debate?
He might as well at this point, right? But they were like, oh, I suppose he was the first pirate, taking the Bible out of the hands of just the clergy and giving it to everyone. And I'm like, do you not understand that was a horrific thing, and that even Luther figured out the mistake? And like, really, these people don't even. And then they're talking more about, well, albums are kind of out of date, and if you just update your music, because like if you put software in GitHub, so this guy's on GitHub, which is cool. I was like, I thought that was funny. He's like, you could just do a version 1.1 of your album, and then people can listen to the old one or the new one. And I'm like, oh, really? That people are that sophisticated, huh? Okay, right. But wait, 2 or 3 sentences later, he's complaining about Spotify. Do you know why? Because you can't just listen to the album on Spotify. And I'm like, do you guys ever listen to the things you say before you speak the next sentence or two? Because you're very lost in contradictions at this point. And it's too bad. I mean, I like both of them, but also not thinkers. Great musicians, bad logic, bad thinking, just terrible.
Yeah, that's why very few musicians ran their own record labels, you know.
Right, but some did. See, this is the thing that kills me. They always complain about these things, and I'm like, yeah, but there are some artists that actually did exactly what you proposed, and they're just highly successful, and you're not. Have we figured out what the difference is? Can we work it through in our tiny brains? No, they probably can't. You know, to be fair, they probably just can't. And they just want things to work differently, but they don't know how. And that's a good sign that these guys are a little off. And it just, yeah, I just wasn't expecting anybody to mention Martin Luther, link him to piracy. And now I have to think about that. I'm like, oh, I got to think about all this. But yeah, I thought it was fascinating. It was a fascinating place to hear something like that too, because it's just so far off of a connection that I thought would ever get made. I mean, they even mentioned Kanye at one point, which is over there, because I guess he revised one of his albums twice. Yeah, it was interesting. The guy's name is Ben Jordan. I've never heard of him as a musician, but apparently he works in the industry and has a bunch of music, and yeah, it was an interesting episode, especially at the end. It got better as it went on, and then right at the end they start doing this crazy talk, and I was like, wow, this is so all these sort of highfalutin, quote, philosophical sort of debates, as I have been saying for years, are just hitting everywhere and collapsing into the same basically religious argument at some level. And yeah, I mean, I don't think people understand that without some form of property right, which, like, IP is not new, the name is new, the function's not new at all. It's just nobody knows any history, and so
I mean, it's like a lot of this piracy is just responding to technologies that amplify our speed and volume of information communication, right? So, like,
yeah. Well, I mean, there's
certainly
just so much going on. The problem isn't the technology at all. The problem is the barrier to entry drops. Right. So if you have to buy a combined radio cassette player, right, some company has to design it, build it, and sell it. Huge barrier to entry, right? Because it's not like by the time those came out, people hadn't been thinking for 2-3 decades, why don't we combine these two things, these tape machines, because they had 8 tracks before they had regular
yeah, well, it was
the
compact cassette needed a little bit of polishing before it was ready for high fidelity music. There was because it was invented in the early 60s, but it was mostly used for voice memos then, and it didn't have as much clarity. And then kind of in the 70s and into the early 80s is when they did some tweaks to it to make it
they had 8 tracks back in the 70s.
Now, could you record your own 8 tracks?
Well, there was nothing particularly but see, this is what I mean by barrier to entry. There's nothing particularly stopping anybody from building that product at any time. All the tech is available.
Yeah,
right? The problem is you have to hook the radio up and tune it to the circuitry in whatever tape. It doesn't matter what tape deck you're using, whatever.
Unless you're going to do it real lo-fi, where you just put the microphone up to the speaker.
Right, but guess what else is happening? It's only the audio files that have any of this equipment anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a whole combination of factors, right? There's a bunch of factors that have to come together before anyone wants to buy a dual cassette radio deck with a turntable on top, which is one of the things that I had at one point. Right. Nobody wants to do. And then not only can you record off the radio, but you can also make your mixed tapes. And there were products out there where you had the radio, you had the tape, and they weren't connected electrically, and so you couldn't record off the radio. In fact, a lot of companies were worried they were going to get sued by the record companies if they did that, which probably was the right answer, by the way. But be that as it may, Yeah. So and making your own mixtape. And one of the reasons why the record companies early on were not scared of this is because it's the fidelity is not there.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the industry is small. They're all audiophiles. So they're like, well, who would bother to do that? Right? I mean, that's the way they think. Well, and they're not wrong. Like, not enough people copied music off the air to threaten the record industry. The record industry was growing gangbusters.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? And it's weird too, because when you find out about how small the industry is and how sensitive industries are, you just find out that with cassette tapes and with CDs, there's really only one event that allows those technologies to exist and not collapse immediately upon release. Do you know what that is?
I don't.
It's Jimmy Page. That's what it is.
Just Jimmy Page, huh?
Actually, without the Led Zeppelin, none of the sales happen. For real. Like, there's whole books about this.
Interesting. All right. I've never heard that story. So
who would know that? You'd have to be a nutbag like me and run across it as a curiosity. Although I'm a huge Led Zeppelin fan. If you don't know anything about Led Zeppelin, you can just ask me, because I haven't read all the recent stuff in the past like 15 years, but all the stuff before that I'm familiar with, right? And
so this is just my first exposure to recordable 8-track tapes, because I wasn't around for this, right?
Well, that's your own fault.
It's actually, like, out of all the things that have happened in my life, that one is not my fault. Like, I am 100% innocent of that charge.
So yeah, I mean, you get into these situations where it's all barrier to entry based, and then large movers, right? If the large mover of Jimmy Page doesn't, when you learn the history of Led Zeppelin, you're like, what the hell is this, right? Because almost all the things that people talk about the artist being abused, and none of that happened with Zeppelin. None of it. They drove the entire industry almost by themselves, right? Them and Ahmet Ertegun.
I mean, they kind of changed like recording studios, even the way they were set up, right? With the way they were miking the instruments and all of that.
Well, yeah, and that's one engineer that worked for Ahmet Ertegun. But actually, so when you start looking into that, which I've done much more recently, every artist did that. They all the big ones, right? Because you've got Boston. You ever hear of the band Boston? That was the first virtual band, right? They were never going to play live because you didn't have to anymore, because it was a burgeoning low barrier to entry technology that enabled them not to have to do that, right? So it's one guy one multi-instrumentalist and one amazing vocalist who can't be matched effectively, Brad Delp, and stolen equipment from the Polaroid Corporation, which I only know because my buddy's father let them take it out of the building. That's his story, and he told it to me while we were driving his father's Toyota Supra at almost entirely unethical speeds, not merely illegal, on the highway. So yes, so when you realize that and then there's Jeff Lynne and what he did. I mean, I could go on, right? And that's not even something I know a lot about. Just recently I've run into some of that.
So we could take this same kind of paradigm, right? Where all of a sudden, you go from needing, 1960s, you need to have a pretty specialized setup to do music piracy. 1980s, you can get by 85 or 87, I imagine these combo setups were a little more common, and you could get a decent recording, but you had to wait for like the radio to play the song you wanted, or you had to borrow or somebody's vinyl.
High time cost.
High time cost. By the time you get to the late 90s, all you need is a computer and an internet connection and a little bit of time, and you could just start torrenting these things.
Not torrenting, but close.
Okay, not torrenting yet. Okay.
But yeah, you could start downloading them, and the download networks were hard to find, right? But once you were in, you were in. So, right. And then yeah, the internet is still ruled, well, unfortunately, partly by Reddit. 4chan's dead, unfortunately, but it's still ruled by IRC and Reddit.
Mhm.
And if you don't know those two things, then you have no idea what's going on the internet for real and who's moving it. And not all of Reddit, so you have to know what parts of Reddit are actually influencing everything. And then
Mhm.
once you know that, then everything else sort of falls into place.
Yeah. So if we take that pattern and we bring it back to the Middle Ages, you go from uh, monks just patiently copying by hand to one guy who has a printing press.
Yep.
There's no intellectual property or like a patent office. So like once people get word about it, they just start tinkering and engineering with it so that
Yep.
they can, make it work more quickly, more efficiently. It's really not that complicated of a concept. So it's sort of like putting the wheels on your baggage, like why didn't we
But
think
that-
of this
even
earlier?
But even that's not right away, because
Yeah.
in the early days, it's still like, oh, you want a printing press, do you? Well, you had two choices. You could use wood blocks, which didn't last very long and were fairly intensive to make, or you could use metal. And the blacksmiths would not make you that stuff if you weren't part of, not all of them. There's always rogue people, right?
Mhm,
Like
mhm.
there's always the rogue component. But generally, you couldn't get that stuff from the blacksmiths. They wouldn't do it. They'd be like, "No, you're not in the right part of the hierarchy. We ain't making it for you."
Mhm,
And it's still the patronage system, and it's still protected by guilds,
mhm,
right? And
mhm.
everybody goes, "Well, we don't want guilds." Did you ever play World of Warcraft or Dark Ages of Camelot or really any of those games? What's the first thing that forms in those games? Guilds every single time. So, you can sit there
Eve
and talk
Online.
and say, we've moved past this. And I'm like, you can't move past it. It's a non-optional component of reality. The guilds are still here. Right. And it's all about the perception of what's going on. And if you don't understand what guilds are and why they're useful, you can get surprised by that, in the same way that the early record company didn't care about you recording onto cassette, because it was so lo-fi that they didn't end tapes wore out. I mean, I don't think any of my old tapes were, although I do have a bunch of them. I should pull them
Did
out.
you did you leave them in a humid environment? Because that's not ideal right there.
No, they're not in a humid environment.
Okay.
Never.
Yeah.
No, they're well protected. But the magnetic forces of the earth erase all digital media over time. So
You gotta have
those tapes
constant
are
archiving.
yeah, those tapes are quite old. Yeah. Yeah, and I worked with 9-track for about a year or two, and yeah, it's same. Tape is so interesting. It's such an interesting format. It's so much better than the other formats, particularly for long-term data storage. Nowadays, hard drives don't even last very long. The new spinny disks. I mean, obviously the SSDs are garbage, but even the new spinny disks, not good, not good. Very shallow, low strength magnetic rates.
Well, hopefully somebody figures that out. I think you just make sure all your data is stored redundantly and
Well, that you do.
hope hope we don't have another Carrington event anytime soon.
I only have 47 terabytes of redundant data, so
Yeah, you might be in trouble.
half of it's empty, half of it's still ready to be filled. And that's just
Oh
here in
yeah.
the other room.
Having visited your house, I believe everything you tell me when it
You
comes
might,
to the
I didn't show off the little box. It's a tiny six disc box, but yeah, it's about 47T right now because I put some new discs in it the other day. So yeah, big storage. Gotta have big storage. Slow as piss because it's an ancient system, but I don't need speed. I just need storage. Doesn't matter if
yeah
it takes a while to copy.
yeah.
That was always the other thing. Tape was always slow, but
Hmm.
once they had those tape robots, you didn't care. Just paid
I
somebody to come in overnight and watch the damn thing. That's what they used to do.
I don't know what a tape robot is, but is that how they made Disney movies on VHS?
No, they have a storage robot for banks in particular. IBM, and I think IBM invented it actually.
Okay.
But it will pick the tapes up and put them in whatever drive is active next, and then take them out and put them away automatically. It's a room. Like it's not a big room, but it's a room. And you could have six tape drives in it, or two, or even just one. And it would just be tapes on the outside, robot in the middle. And the robot would just go and grab tapes and put them it would store it in a circle because that was super efficient. It was pretty cool. Yeah, they had that in the 90s. They had all that. And the stuff they were doing with tapes back in the day, especially on the DAT style tapes, the high density audio tapes, amazing stuff. Amazing. Super high density data storage. And then the DLTs came later. And of course, the tape robot you can adapt the tape robot for any size tape. So yeah, there was, and that, like, the things they do to put data, because they actually cross the data on tape and they read it both sides, and even though it crosses over, there's no interference. Like, oh yeah, you start reading about data tape encoding strategies, and it's just like, how does any of this work? This doesn't seem realistic at all. None of this sounds real. Just the distances and the magnetics that you're talking about. And I mean, it's not as cool as the ASML machine that pounds the freaking dots at different rates, but it's close. It's close.
No, we had engineers, man. We had engineers, and they were just making stuff.
Cool stuff. Really cool. Yeah, tape technology was where it was at for many decades, actually. That was the frontier. And then my buddy here, Fred, he worked with the guy who did the magnetics for hard drives, like for hard disks. That was one of his professors at I think it was USC, University of California or something. One of the California universities. Yeah, he worked with him for a while. He's got interesting stories. See, he does magnetic spin stuff and all kinds of crazy. I couldn't keep up with all that. That was but he worked in a lab and electron microscopes. It turns out you can etch chips with an electron microscope, which I did not know. And that would be way better than the tech they're using. You can't go as low as the crazy ASML machine, as far as I know, but you can go low enough. He was like, maybe I should quit my AI business and do this instead. And I'm like, yeah, actually, you kind of should. This sounds like fun, because we wouldn't want to do normal chip fab in South Carolina because we have water here, and normal chip fab, just the chemicals involved, you wouldn't want to be anywhere near those chemicals within like 4 or 5 states. But if it's just a big scanning electron microscope, well, hey, that doesn't take any chemicals at all, relatively speaking. I mean, I think you need to cool it or something, but you're not etching in that way. You're etching with a beam. So
is he gonna make RAM? Is he gonna get into the RAM business? And
I don't know what he could. Well, no, he really knows what he's doing. Everyone's telling him, like, dude, you could probably get like $1 billion from the state to build one of those. Like, whether you were successful or not, like, they'd probably do it. I was like, probably. Like, call me if it's like, I want to help you. So,
get in on the ground floor, man. That's the place to be.
The ground floor of that would be cool. Well, because we could really fab anywhere. We wouldn't have to fab in the deserts. Which is the only safe place to fab. He told me, I don't know if this is true, but he told me every single fab plant has had a horrific toxic environmental accident. And I believe it, because I just can't see how, one of those, I forget the name of one of the chemicals, and my ex-girlfriend told me about this chemical too, but basically it eats calcium. And you have to use it for all. It's not just chip fab; it's any kind of etching work at all. So coatings and things like that. But if you are exposed to it at all, it leaches through your skin and dissolves your bones, like within seconds.
Well, that's pretty bad. That does not sound like a good time to
be. Well, you can
almost
ask
as
Adam
bad as that. What is it? Triple bonded fluorines. There's a certain chemical you can make that'll actually burn sand,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that stuff just like I read articles about it. It's like it burns sand. Like, how do you do that? Well, it's just that potent of an oxidizer. So, yeah, chlorine trifluoride. It's just
Yeah, that stuff is awful.
yeah. So anyway, um, it's great when there are man-made horrors beyond my comprehension. When they're a long ways away from me, because there's no chlorine trifluoride in my room that I'm aware of. What's be the most dangerous chemical in my room here? Maybe whatever's in the lava lamp. Who knows what they put in those things? I think
Oh,
it's
the lava lamp. Yeah, that's got
it's
some
probably just
toxic chemicals in it.
probably just paraffin wax, and then trace amounts of something awful.
No, the fluid that the paraffin floats in is really toxic. Yeah, it's horrible. Because it has to be a certain viscosity at a certain temperature, right? So it causes all kinds of problems. But yeah, you can ask Adam about that stuff. Although he's in California right now.
He's in California, just working.
Yeah,
Recent trip.
he's doing courses. He sent me a picture this morning of breakfast.
A big American breakfast.
They were at Denny's. I was like, oh, that's cool. And he did indicate that we can do at least one more history video. So
Okay.
I think so. Your hopes and dreams will be answered, sir.
Uh-huh.
You will get Otto von Bismarck out of him, and probably the entire existence of the total psyop that is this thing called Germany that does not exist before, what is it, 1858 or whatever the heck it is. Even though everybody uses that term and is referring to any number of things that have nothing to do with a country or a unified region or anything, or a common language. Germania, the Germanic language is only spoken a tiny section of that area. Before Bismarck comes along and screws it all up because he sees a vision slightly better than Napoleon's. So that's going to be a fun history video. But yeah, we're going to do that one. End of this month, I think. Yeah. End of this month. We should be able to get it recorded. So I'm excited about that.
See this conversation, Mark.
Navigating Patterns, the greatest YouTube channel to
imaginable.
Imaginable
That which no greater YouTube channel could be conceived.
Exactly. Thank you, Father. Yeah, I'm just I'm tired today. It's been a long day today.
I had just such an enjoyable day today. I've been mulling over doing this for a while, and I finally pulled the trigger today. But I went to a pawn shop and bought a laptop for $200. A 5-year-old laptop. It's got a Ryzen 5 5500U in there. It's got like a 15 watt power draw, 11-inch screen there, and I put Linux on it.
Yes,
and it's excellent. It's not Arch Linux. It's just Mint. The baby Linux distro.
Mint's okay.
Yeah. So it's just going to be a fun little thing to have around and experiment with. But like, it was super smooth. Like the biggest problem I had getting that up and running was figuring out how to get the thing to boot from the USB drive that I had made.
Yep.
And like once I'd figured that out, it just stalled right away. And gosh, when I'm running it, just like without any programs open, it only uses like 1.3 gigabytes of the memory.
Oh, it's not using anything like that. It might be allocating that much but most of it's cache. Linux is unbelievably fast. Like you look at Linux and then you're like, what the hell is wrong with Microsoft, man? Because you can swap and run it on the same hardware. It's night and day. It's ridiculous how quick Linux can be. Mm-hmm. So, that's great. Good for you.
Yeah. Just a little guy. He's over there. I'll come up with some more fun things to do with him later. I'll see what I really want to be able to do. This is the long-term goal. Is I'll upgrade my cell phone plan, and then when I'm done with my Canon Law School, we might take the Monday night open mic show on the road, and I'll get you from like every campground in North Dakota. Uh, I want to do
That's
that
cool.
more when I'm done with my canon law degree. I just have to get through the next 4 months somehow.
Somehow.
I really
yeah.
want to get my thesis done, and I've got two chapters completely drafted,
Oh, good.
and I want to get the next chapter drafted in like a month, and it's like the busiest month of my life. So we'll see what God has in store.
And then when are you in DC?
Just before Memorial Day.
I'll have to drive up there and see you.
Yeah, or we'll talk. We'll talk.
Well, and then everybody's looking forward to Fargo Con there for.
Yeah, I gotta. Not this year. Not this year. What
I
would
told
you
them all,
want?
not this year. I told them.
Yeah.
I told them we get one more year, but
What would you want out of a conference? Like, I don't even know what to do with this. I just know I'm good at organizing things.
just copy Ted. Oh my God, that was the greatest thing in the world. The only thing that competed with it was obviously Thunder Bay, which was completely awesome. So, and I bet
I think it's just the economics of the little conferences. I definitely need to pick his brain on it. I don't know. Who do you want talking at it? I've got the whole plan of like how we would do a little conference, and like we would probably go to one of the retreat centers that we have here in North Dakota. It's a bit of a drive, but like people who are committed will carpool or rent cars or whatever, and we'll have food and bedding provided.
yeah.
Place for a bonfire, all the stuff
thought-
that you want.
I thought Ted's was too small. I think double that size would be good.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I mean, I think the thing I think the stuff around Eyes to See, which who posted that on my server? Was that Castle? Just posted this like 18-minute talk or something. It was excellent. It reminded me of Monsignor Shea and Eyes to See, eye blindness, right?
Mhm.
I think that, and I think Domicide, because I think that it is my suspicion, with what little evidence I have, although I have much more than most people, that Domicide is the single most resident word for the people that are in the most trouble, that are, I would argue, although I might be completely wrong about this, are the easiest to help quickly, right? The easiest to get momentum out of. In other words, if you can tell somebody you're in Domicide and we have tools for you, I think like they will come. Like, I think they will definitely come.
Are they starving spiritually?
I think so.
And you're hoping that they're hungry enough to eat the vegetables?
Yeah. No. I think I think Lynn's gonna come. Good. If Lynn's going, I'm going for sure. Yeah. The other possibility, Father, is you could talk to Catherine, because she was like, well, I don't know if people want to come to Thunder Bay again. And I'm like, no. This whole thing that Symbolic World is doing, like we're going to be centrally located, that's a lie. I know this from corporate work. That's a lie, right? It doesn't matter where you put it. People are going to bitch about it. Because if you're getting on a plane, you're getting on a plane. Like, unless you're flying across an ocean, unless you're going to Hawaii or Ireland or Japan or Dubai or something, it really doesn't matter. Like, most flights around here are 3 hours or less, right? I mean, if you're going coast to coast, but putting it in the middle doesn't really help that. And then if you're in the middle, like Symbolic World 2 is, no one's gonna be happy, because there's not gonna be enough stuff there to do, and it won't be like, the thing about Thunder Bay is Thunder Bay was super interesting place. So much history. I just want to spend a week there.
Okay, so when you were talking about copy Ted's, I was thinking, okay, so like we want to go to like a bit of a rustic setting.
I think so. I'm just saying, I'm giving you options here, because I bet Catherine would do Thunder Bay in Fargo instead of Thunder Bay. I don't know why, but
It's because it's
I
easier
do
for
it.
Americans to get there.
I don't
We've
think
got the,
so.
we've got the
I don't think so. I like the Canada filter because it keeps out all the ex-convicts, which it seems to be good. I don't know why, but it just works out that way somehow. Magic. But
I have no idea what you're talking about, but never mind that.
I think with the ex-convicts, I'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I think that if it's around things like domicide and blindness or eye blindness or something, I really liked eye blindness. I think it will resonate really, really well. And it was interesting too because this priest is basically he goes to a conference with a white paper and the whole 9 yards, and he presents his white paper and all the scientific evidence over Marian apparitions, right? And how they've studied these things and they've studied the brains of these people and they're not having seizures and blah, 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 blah. And then they have an adversary there, right, for the papers. And when he gets up to do the adversary for him, the guy basically goes, well, how do you know it's not aliens? It sounds exactly like aliens. And this, of course, catches him completely off guard because it's a scientist. So, like, you really didn't do the scientific adversarial thing at all. And then he decided to answer with, well, if it is aliens, they're pretty good at bringing people into the Catholic Church. So we might ask ourselves why. And then of course the guy backed off, like, well, I'm not saying it was aliens. That's right. Oh, your attack didn't work, did it? I was like, this is great. This is
with the revelation of Final Cause there.
Can you imagine? I mean, this guy's my hero now. I'm like, I could only pray that
all right, I'm gonna break. Well, what channel was this in? Important Videos?
I think so, but no, it wasn't actually. I think it was in Discussions Ethereal. Discussions Ethereal. That's what it was. Yeah. But I could only pray that I would have the wherewithal to come up with such a great response to something like that. I mean, now I'm cheating because I've heard the trick. I'm like, oh, I can duplicate that. Let's keep that trick in mind. But like, I don't think in the moment I would have been able to pull that one off. But oh yeah, you got to listen to that thing. That story's awesome. That whole talk is great. And it really did remind me of Monsignor Shea and eye blindness. I was like, oh yeah, this guy's on it. But I think domicide and eye blindness, this inability to see something, super important. Because just like I guess Paul Ehrlich died at age 93 today or yesterday or something, and Twitter's talking about it, and you got all these people going, oh, he's my hero, and all these other people going, yeah, he was wrong about everything. Like, actually,
he was the population bomb guy.
He was the population bomb guy.
Yeah,
that wasn't the only thing. That wasn't the only book he wrote that was so full of bleep that, if you took any of it seriously, you probably drowned in it long ago, right? Like, what a dope. And the New York Times apparently wrote his obituary as, his predictions were premature from 1968, and they still haven't come true. Yeah, I guess that's premature.
Oh, man, that is the biggest, that is the highest dose copium I've seen in a while.
The New York Times, on Twitter, at least, on Twitter, Father, they have this whole thing going with a contest for the dumbest New York Times headlines. And that one is currently on the leaderboard at the top. And they don't expect it to remain there long because the New York Times is just garbage. It's complete garbage.
The Soviets couldn't come up with propaganda that compelling. That's a work of art right there.
It's a work of art of stupidity anyway. But it's just so funny because another guy wrote, I think he took the original tweet down, which is unfortunate, but he basically wrote, the problem with this guy is that he didn't care one whit that he was wrong at all, and he never admitted to being wrong at all.
Oh, he's a large language model.
He's a large language model, right? And
right, like, oh man, I'm really sorry that I got that wrong. Let me see if I could, oh yeah, the moon orbits around the Earth, not the other way around.
Yeah. So, but that pattern's everywhere in the number of people that don't see it. Because somebody else said a while back, it was maybe 3 or 4 days ago on Twitter, they were like, the problem with the people who are, like on their, against the left now is that, they're trying to find solutions instead of admitting that they were part of the problem and were wrong. And I was like, exactly. And the number of people that just don't see that, like, you can't explain to them. So this guy is explaining to you that the CIA has an active secret program. Does anybody see the problem with this statement right now? Right. And he's never been in the CIA. He's never worked at the CIA. He doesn't know anybody at the CIA, but he's telling you about a secret CIA program. No, nobody sees the contradiction, but they don't. Like, this is a big problem. People don't even see these shell games that people are playing. I mean, they're just making the most ridiculous statements, and all this
because they're starving spiritually, Mark.
Right. Well, no, I mean, I thought
No. So this. I hate to bring myself up over and over again, but like every once in a while, my old man and I would have to drive somewhere early in the morning. It's just like it's life. And what would we do? We'd turn on Coast to Coast AM, obviously. Like if it's 4 o'clock in the morning and you're in the car, that is the best entertainment. That is no, it's not even just. I mean, certainly it served that function.
Yeah. It also keeps you awake.
But it was just the best. Like, the things that people would call in on that, right? But like, if you're not starving for meaning, you can just use that as entertainment. Like, look at what these people are saying. But like, if you're really starved for meaning, like you're gonna glomp onto anything that looks like meaning, even if it's you're gonna boil shoe leather and try and eat it. That's what you're gonna do.
If you're starving for meaning, it was definitely aliens. I think that's the catchphrase right there, Father.
If you're starving for meaning, then yes, it was the aliens.
It was definitely alien. Well, that's the Ancient Aliens show. It was definitely aliens.
Aliens. I don't have the hair, neither do you.
Alien. Yeah, I'm just so want to disown my Greek heritage just because he exists now. Yeah, terrible. Terrible.
Man, like you can hold on to like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle,
How the mighty have fallen.
King Leonidas, Herodotus, Odysseus, and there's all. You got enough to hang your hat. You'll be fine. Don't worry about one rando. That's just a blip right there. That's not even a real number. One.
Hopefully. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's just it's an interesting way to look at it. Was the bifurcation of the human, the invalid though it may be, causing this problem of filling a gap, right? Of feeding the soul when it was intended for filling time. And I think that's actually the problem of mass media, right? It's very hard for people to know the difference, right?
Between like entertainment and soul food, something like that.
Well, between the audiences. Like there's just certain things you don't want to tell somebody who's mentally ill.
Oh, yeah.
And if you have mass media, what do you like?
The guy who's sitting there watching the 5 o'clock news and is convinced that the very attractive weather lady is speaking to him personally in code. Like, how do you control that? You're broadcasting it on ultra high frequency.
Or not in code. One of the guys I worked with and I got into an argument over that once. I mean, it was obviously in jest, but he was like, I know she wants me. And I was like, Vernon, you're older. She wants me. It was very funny.
Well, I'm sure you had to be there. But but no, it's like if you're just broadcasting this to literally everybody.
Yeah. You don't know. And then no one on the other side is preventing anybody from ingesting anymore. And that wasn't always true. Right. And that's part of the problem, is that there's no more demarcation of audience at all. And there's no expectation I mean, there was an expectation, right? Like there used to be a censorship board and stuff, right? There was an expectation, but now that expectation is gone. Um, but people treat it as if those things are still in place. Father, I remember I was sitting at my computer and I was running the Netscape browser, and it was on the deck station actually, which is in the shed, which was the fastest booting 46 ever built. I'm just going to tell you right now, I know for a fact it is, and I built it. That's how I know, and I tested the piss out of it. It's very fast. It'll be way faster than Windows 11. Low bar. And I was running Netscape on it, and I remember pulling up the news groups, that's where all the questionable info was on the internet back in the day. And I remember that it could just display pictures, and I was like, that is not, because on websites, except for Goatse, you really didn't have like porn websites. You couldn't do that. The forces of the internet would prevent you from getting domains and IP addresses for real. Like your IP addresses would be pulled if you did that. Absolutely. They'd just get pulled. You couldn't do that with Usenet because Usenet's this big group thing, and it was designed differently, and it's not centralized, right? And each operator could opt out of certain news groups, so they could get rid of all the porn going across the news groups pretty easily. But even then, you had to download it, you had to convert it, and then you had to convert it again to see it. Now you could just click on it with your browser. And I was like, oh, they're going to ban this for sure. They're going to the whole nine. They're going to pull the feature out. Never happened. And I remember that day distinctly because I knew that, like, oh no, they can't let this go.
Somebody is in charge and is going to prevent this from happening.
Nope. It was too early days on the internet, and no one did. And then once you don't stop it, that train kept a rolling. And I don't think anybody saw it because the news groups, while they were popular, they weren't, and this is, early web days. They weren't that big compared to where they thought the web was going. They thought, because a lot of the old services went away, like Archie and Gopher went away when the web came up. So I think they thought the news groups were going to go away. The news groups are never going to go away. News groups and IRC were never going to go away from the internet for lots of interesting technical reasons. But no one did anything about it. And, no wonder why we have porn websites now, because you already let the cat out of the bag, maybe without realizing it. Like maybe no one understood. But in the early days, if you tried to run like a porn site on the internet, there's no way they would throw you off. And they still can, technically. They would throw you off in a heartbeat. I mean, now it's just much harder. What they did do, and this is years ago, I read an article from a software engineer who his specialty, he was a consultant, but his specialty was getting payment systems to work for banned websites, mostly porn sites, he said, but also there's other sites that, they sell things that are illegal in some countries and not others, or whatever, or maybe some things that are completely illegal everywhere, but somehow they're still available on the internet.
And obviously you're friends with them.
No, it was an article. And what he was writing about was the reason why these sites are so expensive is because they're making no money, because there's 5 or 6 payment processors in the way, because they banned all the payment processors. So you have to launder the money overseas through multiple payment processors, because because they can still stop you, right? They can debank you. So what they had been relying on in the US in particular, but also in a bunch of European countries, was if you have a porn site, we'll just make it impossible for you to monetize it. And they're very expensive to run because they're high data, high bandwidth, right? So they're super expensive to run.
It's a YouTube problem. But
it didn't work. But you'd think there'd be porn all over YouTube, but no, they just ban it when it comes in. So it's not like they can't get rid of this stuff, but you have to have some agreement, right? Somebody has to actually do the work. They have to put those things in place. And I thought for sure when I brought up that news group and it just displayed a picture, I'm like, oh, no. They're going to ban this. this is going to get like someone's going to do something about this. I thought they'd pull the tech out of the browser, which is real easy to do. Because there was only Netscape back then anyway. The other browsers didn't matter worth a spit. But they never did. They never did. And I thought that was probably the wrong door to leave cracked open. And I don't think we've recovered from that.
And here we are on YouTube, and we're playing in people's browsers. And it's just decoding everything immediately, so smooth, so easy. It's not like, yeah.
Well, the Usenet groups, which are still active, by the way, and still work. I mean, you can still access them. They encode everything in text. And so it's usually encoded in something called base 64. So you have to get the news article, decode the base 64, and then you have a binary file, and then you can open it. But I think to this day, most of the browsers can still do news groups. If not, the news group readers can auto decode, and they have things like multi-part binaries. And back in the day, you had software that you wrote to stitch together the multi-part binaries and do the error correction, because some of them were sent with error correcting files. we had it going on. We had it quite going on, because back then you had modems, and modems would make.
Back then, nerds were nerds.
Nerds were well, and the barrier to entry was high. And when the barrier to entry was high, the internet was great, right? I mean, we still had Goatsy, which is just, I still want compensation. It's got to be at least as bad as mesothelioma. But for the most part, the people were great. And even the really annoying ones, they were still, there was a code, there was honors, there were systems in place, there was manners existed, there were, and they got breached, on a regular enough basis, but they got corrected immediately. And now the internet really is the Wild West, where you just, people pop onto live streams and put porn on. And it's like, what is this? You couldn't have gotten away with that back in the day, even in the early 2000s.
Back in the dinosaur days.
Well, I've been on the internet for a long time. So back in the before times when I got my IP addresses, early 90s, baby, it was a whole different world. And even the bulletin boards, you could tell the people too who were on the bulletin boards who, had money, and those whose kids set them up on the internet and probably shouldn't have, or the bulletin boards and probably shouldn't have. You could tell the difference. And it's interesting how things flow, because everybody thinks, the internet's equal and blah, blah, blah. And then they're worried about algo. And I'm like, 4chan and IRC and Reddit are having far more influence on internet experience than any of those other things are. Sorry. You just don't know how this works. And fair enough. It's not, it's almost like you'd have to be there, right? You'd have to have been there to know how this really works, where all the torrents come from, where all the data, how things get popular, right? And putting the spotlight on 4chan killed it, right? Once Pepe and that came out, and people figured out, hey, 4chan's actually moving the entire internet through, through group activity, basically through cooperation. And they're manipulating the algorithm. Yeah, well, people manipulate the algorithm more than anything else does. And then that killed it. Right now, it's 4chan doesn't do that anymore. They can't. So it's
a sort of power that vanishes when it becomes apparent, but when it's
if the other powers see it. Okay. So, like little known fact in computer history, right? So at one point, Microsoft is like on the ascension, right? They've got, I don't know, I think they had $120 billion in cash. It's a completely unheard of number. No business runs cash like that, but they had it, like not stock, like actual dollars in bank cash. Super unusual. I don't think any company's ever done that before. And just kept it there without a plan. Like some companies will hoard their money for a while with a plan. But Microsoft didn't have a plan. They were just bored children buying toys, right? So they at one point decided, because they saw what was going to happen, they were like, well, there's only 2 big software players for accounting software. And the other big player other than Microsoft was Intuit. And they were like, well, we're going to buy Intuit. And then, they had all these big plans to get into banking. Well, guess what happened when the bankers figured this out?
They
That
talked to
deal
their
never
buddies at
happened.
the FCC.
That deal never happened. It got
No, the
quiet.
SEC. They would have talked to their friends at the SEC and shut that
No,
down.
it's banking's completely different. There's a federal banking regulation.
Okay, sure. Okay, all right.
So actually, I think what they did was, I think it was Bill Clinton actually, but I think they went to Bill Clinton and basically said, you ain't doing this or we're crippling the economy completely. So you better talk to your buddy Bill and tell him no, because we're not doing this, flat out not. And it got some reporting and then it got swept under again. And I actually interviewed it Intuit a couple times. That was a very messed up software company. Very messed up place. So yeah, it was, but that sort of thing has happened lots of times because it just, you don't see the power structures and the threats and the, I mean, when Microsoft got into trouble with monopoly, which they were completely guilty of and should probably all be imprisoned for because then computers wouldn't suck. They just threatened to move the entire company to Africa, and that was sufficient for the US government to charge them and then drop the charges. So it would be double jeopardy, which technically doesn't exist at the federal level, but whatever. Not for corporations. So that they wouldn't ever get that problem again in exchange for them not moving to Africa. Meanwhile, I was like, please send them all to Africa. That would be wonderful. Because I knew what was going to happen. I was like, yes, let them go. We don't need them. Honest, it'll be fine. Right?
The free software movement. I mean, I just installed free software on my laptop.
Those guys, you want blindness.
The
The number of times I had to explain to them, you do know this can be used for evil, right? And they were like, nobody would ever use our software that way. And I was just like, oh my God, really? Stallman was completely just out to space. Like he could not, but all the other guys too, Jim Blandy and all the other Bushnell and Roland McGrath and all those kids, like they were all clueless about this. They were all actual idealists who thought no one would ever use this for nefarious purposes. And I was just staring at them like, you can't be this. You guys are all brilliant. How can you not see this? But they actually couldn't see it. There was no point at which they could see it. And I could not. I tried. I could not make them see it. And even when it was happening, I was like, look at this guy. He's doing this with the software and the internet. And they were like, well, and I was like, what? No, you got to like do something about this. You can't let this go on. But they did.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding is also the free software movement would violate the Aristotelian Thomist perspective of natural law because basically they're saying that you don't have a right to the property that you create.
Well, I don't think that's what they were doing.
No.
I think they were just saying this is the way it should be. This is like everybody gets free software, and we can. And there's a lot of things that do kind of function that way, where people just kind of collaborate on them. But
everything is actually free. Like people don't realize this. All the important things are actually free, and or only available for barter and not for money. Already, and that was always the case. The mistake that Stallman and those guys made was the following. They were so paranoid, and they were paranoid. Like, I know these guys. They were definitely paranoid. I was also paranoid. I felt quite at home in the GNU offices. That was great. We were all paranoid together, anonymous on the internet. You know nothing. Nothing. I think there's one reference to my old handle anywhere on the internet to this day. That's how anonymous I was. And I was on the internet all the time back in the late 80s, early 90s. So they decided to use the weapons of their enemy against them. And so they created a legal license to make sure that other people couldn't create a legal license that was restrictive. So they made an unrestricted legal license for the software formally. That was their mistake. They did not need to do that. I don't, to this day, I don't understand the logic. I don't know why they did this.
I mean,
And
would the argument be that if they license it in this way, then corporations wouldn't be able to put it into their, take their code, put it into their product, and then make money off of it?
no, their argument was, you're just not enough of a universalist utopian, Father. You just can't pull off this level of thought, because
Okay, you know what?
really,
I'm taking that as a W right there.
you should take that as a W. Yeah. The level of unawareness of the universe required to pull off this feat of dopey thinking is just, you ain't got it. You ain't got it. You got way too many IQ points in the right way or in the right place. Their thinking was, by doing this, we would destroy businesses' ability to do things, because this is clearly better. And what would happen is the businesses would either have to do business basically in a socialist open manner, which was always slightly differently defined based on which one of those idiots you were talking to, or the system would collapse and everything would just be free, like everything, like all things everywhere.
And so
Not
they
just
they
software.
just weren't prepared for Bill Gates to show up and say, "Hey, why don't we sell our software instead?"
No, they knew Bill Gates. They knew before. Bill Gates was way before that.
Sure, but
No,
all you have to do, it's sort of like why diamonds have to be so expensive is because otherwise they're not valuable. If they're not, if like you're actually selling them at cost, like they're not valuable enough.
no.
People don't want to buy it.
No.
So
on the high end of compute at the time, and see, this is the other bugaboo, right, that people don't realize. Stallman's great. I know Stallman. I've talked to him many times. Whatever. Like, definitely a very smart guy who can code like no one else I've seen personally. I mean, he's not the best coder on the internet, but he's the best coder I ever watched. It's like, I typed for him, so I was typing. He was telling me what to type. It was pretty cool. But like, he was looking at the high end of the market, and in the high end of the market, when you bought a $35,000, $50,000 workstation from one of these companies, their only software you could get was written by them the way they wrote it, period. That was all you could get.
It probably ran well too.
Oh, they were amazing. I loved work. We had all kinds of free machines in the labs that were donated because the companies, like they were caught in a fundamental contradiction. The companies know what you're up to. They know what your goal is, and they're giving you free hardware. Not smart enough to figure out that they know something you don't and you're a moron, huh? Well, fair enough. It's fine. Because they, like Sun and HP and all those guys, shipped all the GNU stuff that they built. They shipped it all. I mean, I used it after I left the labs. I used it. I was like, oh, look, all this stuff is now shipping. I mean, a lot of it I downloaded. Like I had custom, but before Bash, TCSH was the right shell to use. It's very close to Bash anyway. So I had custom TCSH dot files and the whole 9 yards. They're called RC files. I had all that. Like I had it all custom. I don't think I have copies of it anymore. But their thought was that was the problem, and that problem was going to continue. What they weren't watching is down below, where Bill Gates was actually, the computer users groups were already giving away and swapping software for free that they wrote with source code in some cases and without in others. That was already happening at the low end of the market. It's $200, $500, $1,000 computer market. That was already there. There was no reason for him to do what he was doing, because he was just only going to affect the high end of the market anyway. And the high end of the market was just going to take his software and improve upon it and ship it and make money off it. And they were making more money off that software and just customizing it because it required less engineering effort and fewer engineers. So I really don't know why he can't logic, but he can't logic. And the last like 4 times or whatever I saw him, and I don't see Stallman very much anymore, but his big bugaboo was you're leasing your music, you're leasing your books. You don't want to do that. They could take that lease away at any time. Read your contract. And I was like, but you're the one that started this whole contract war. Like, you're the one that led to Amazon directly, and you're the one that led Amazon to figure out about doing this lease contract, with an electronic license, because they were foundational in getting electronic licenses to be binding, and that just turns out to be a mistake. Like, that was just a mistake. We shouldn't have done that. That was stupid, because that led to the agree here button and no one reads the license. That's what that led to. But that is at least partially Stallman's fault. Like, I'm sorry, I was there. Definitely. Like, not good.
So they could have avoided all of this just by being like, yeah, our software's free.
They could have done what they were doing without putting a license on it at all. Yeah. Because part of their license was meant to be restrictive, and he kind of bit himself with that restrictive GNU license. So back in the 90s, these companies would be like, well, we like to use the GNU compiler and the GNU memory allocator because it's much more efficient than the one that everybody else was shipping. Basically, all of the other ones were not as good as his. Well, maybe there was one exception to that, but they couldn't, because it wasn't clear from the licensing whether or not they had to open source all their source code just because they used not the compiler, but that library, because the compiler didn't work as well with the libraries it wasn't built for, right? So, and some companies cross-linked, but some companies just wrote their own malloc, and that was fine too, because once you modified the source code, the license didn't apply the same way. So they were all playing games like that with the software back in the day. But it actually hampered the adoption. And because they could never write, although I guess they just released a stable version of their kernel, which they were working on in 1989. But they
I bet you it's a really good kernel,
Roland was high a lot. I don't know. I think they had to scrap all his work. I don't know. Maybe not. I have no idea. I just know he was high a lot. And he was the one working on the, it's called GNU Herd. He was the one working on that, but Herd just released a version recently. There was like I think it was the second actual release, and the first one was like a few years ago. But it wasn't until Linux came along and the GNU suite that the GNU stuff really took off, right? Because before that, it was, sure, I had it on my Amiga. Of course long before Linux existed. Of course I did. I had because I grew up on the Unix machines and the 8-bit machines at the same time. So I had access to both, because my father worked at Computer Vision. So I was on Sun workstations all the time. So I was way ahead of the curve. So yeah, I knew, I had read all the books on all the Unix stuff and all the stuff they talk with the hackers. I mean, I didn't read all those books because some of them are redundant, but the Red Book and the Dragon Book and all that stuff. And yeah, I had all that in my head long before that was a thing. And that whole world, that's how it survived. It survived on those licenses. And to be fair, like, Stallman wasn't wrong about the business model. The correct business model is to give the software away and sell the consulting and the documentation. That is correct. The problem is only one company was ever able to pull that off. It was called Cygnus Consulting or Development out of Texas. And they got bought by Red Hat a zillion years ago. And I think that's the same company that wrote Cygwin, which is free. So if you wanted to use the Unix utilities on your Windows machine, which I've been doing since day one, you just download Cygwin and do it. I don't play any of that game anymore. Post Linux, you don't need Unix utilities on your Windows machine anymore anyway. So post Linux, you run Linux and you do your Linux work there, and you run Windows for all the cool fun stuff. And that's just the way it is. But I used to, when I had my, my 58 machine lab back in the day, I had Linux machines and all kinds of other Unix machines doing all kinds of things. I had a Minix machine, and I had a couple Sun machines, Spark and 68,000. I had all kinds of garbage. And, I just had custom machines for everything. I built a machine that was web-based probably 2007, maybe 2005. And all you did with it was it had two CD-ROM burners in it. And you could just copy CDs or burn an image, and it was headless. You just went to the web interface. And I was building headless machines in 91 for Space
Yeah.
Root
Well,
Tank.
you're basically just at that point like building. It's just like you're running the machine without an operating system, or at least an operating system that you're
Minimal.
interacting with.
It's a minimal operating system.
And so and so you would just be like running hardware basically.
Yep.
And so you could do like a really interesting kind of decentralized workflow if you want. I suppose you still had to walk over there and put blank CDs in there.
Right, but it was a relatively small machine. It was only 2 drive heights plus a bit high, and it sat in the corner, and there was a monitor on it, but that was for a different machine. And then if I needed to copy something, I went to a web interface, and I just told it what I want. Now, burn me a copy of this image here. I wrote all the code. Burn me a copy of this image here, right? Or just copy A to B or B to A, whatever it was. And it would just copy CDs. It would copy images onto CDs, whatever you needed. And I had a bunch of utility machines like that would do various different things. And of course, I'm running 2 routers, and I'm running 4 routers because security. It's called Belt and Suspender Security System, Cheswick, the Cheswick book, good stuff. So yeah, you couldn't. No one ever broke into any of my machines. Still. So they broke into the exterior router twice. But no one's ever got past my exterior router. It's not likely. I don't suppose it's impossible, but you'd have to be really good. And I don't think there's any holes that I don't have patched. So.
And then there's also, what do you have that's worth stealing?
I don't have anything now that's worth stealing. Back then I did. I had all kinds of stuff. But yeah, you'd have to know. You'd have to want it. You'd have to know it was there, which no one did. A lot of the stuff I had was, I got it anonymously. Let me put it that way. So if somebody knew that it wasn't only where it was supposed to be, they didn't know who had it. So the fact that it was somewhere in one of my machines didn't mean anything. They wouldn't have known where to get it. But that's what happens with these early decentralized systems, and the fact that it really is the Wild West. Like I said, it's just the Wild West with a lower barrier now, and so it's a free for all. Like, why is Pornhub still in business? I don't even understand that. Like, they should take that down.
They got good lawyers, apparently.
I don't know what they're doing. Actually, I'm actually shocked that they haven't gotten rid of that one. I don't have an.
Well, what they're doing now is they've started rolling this out, age verification.
Yeah, because the states put it in place, right?
Well, and then I think some places in Europe have done it too.
Yep.
But I don't know. I guess I don't think trusting the websites. Yeah, the
it's
websites
impossible.
To do this is,
it's counter to the design of the internet. Like, the base level design of the internet does not allow this to work in a pragmatic, practical manner at all. And it's just funny to see people try, right? But ultimately,
we've got our alternative communication system during a nuclear war now, and it's very difficult to take it down all at once. So,
right,
mission accomplished there.
Yeah, it's a little weird. The trade-offs for centralized versus decentralized, people still haven't figured it out yet. And they just don't, like the crypto bros, they so desperately want to get away from the banks, but they want a stable currency. And I'm like, well, I got news for you guys. The best you can do is swap banks. You're not going to get rid of the banks. And so the banks are taking it over anyway. They're bad at numbers, right? They're like, oh, Bitcoin's worth, 4 trillion or whatever the hell it is. I don't even know. And I'm like, okay, but the banking industry is at least one more zero. So you're still a small player. You see big number, you think number big, but you don't know how big the numbers can get. And so you're just wrong about how big that number is and what
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? So North Dakota, we have a state bank. And
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
one of the few left that has like a state bank.
Yep.
And they're rolling out cryptocurrency,
Yep.
right? And you know what it's for? It's for bank transfers.
Yeah. Interbank. Yeah.
Interbank transfers. And I was like,
Yep.
oh, okay. Well, when I saw that, I'm like, well, that might actually work.
Yep, it does. They're not the first ones. One of the so one of the people on my Friday calls, she's a big time banking attorney
Mhm.
from up north,
Mhm.
from Connecticut, actually, of all the places. And she was in Charlotte, which is the second largest banking capital in the world, by the way, Charlotte, North Carolina. So
Oh.
she was giving a talk. We drove up there to meet her for lunch. She was absolutely thrilled. And she was talking about, oh yeah, we already implemented cryptocurrency to do the internal bank accounting. So that wasn't even bank to bank transfer. That was just to keep track of the money in the bank and where it.
Because cryptography can actually do that pretty well, keeping track of
Well,
things.
no, I think the problem is people don't realize there isn't one currency system. There has never ever been one currency system.
Mhm.
There's a currency system for large transfers,
Mhm.
right? Which is gold and silver, although it can be other things. And there's currency transfers or currencies for medium transfers like interbank, which is usually not gold, right? It's usually pallets of some denomination, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And then there, right? And it's on and on and on, right? Like
Mhm.
wood. And there's all kinds of, bearer bonds or not bearer bonds are legal now, but
Mhm.
bond types and other transfers that happen overnight that have nothing to do with pennies and dimes and quarters and dollars and tens and 20s and 50s.
Mhm.
And people just don't because look, I mean, you can only learn so much about the world, right? Because they've never looked into how complex banking actually is. They just don't realize this stuff. Like a lot of people don't know, if you're building a house, you can get what's called a builder's loan. And the financial instrument of a builder's loan has completely different rules from a mortgage. They don't look alike at all because they have no overlap. And people also don't realize, like, if I had like $10 million and I wanted to buy your house and have you pay me back, I can write a mortgage and make it whatever I want. So I could write a mortgage that said you have to pay me, $1 every 3 months until this is paid off. And if it's not paid off in 5 years, it automatically reverts to being your property anyway, because people do that. And it's like, what? But it's contract law, baby, right?
Mhm.
There's some specialties to mortgage contract law, and it's got a bunch of federal regulations on it, but there's a lot of leeway. You can do all kinds of things in a mortgage. What do you think rent to own is? Rent to own is a mortgage contract, right? It's a special type of mortgage contract. It's a mortgage contract. And as long
Mhm.
as you make your mortgage payments for long enough, you have the option to buy out the mortgage from
Mhm.
the person. It's never a bank. Banks don't issue rent to own for very good reasons, but owners do. People who own houses cash, that's a mortgage. It's just a special rent to own mortgage agreement.
Mhm.
And people that, like, you don't know all the financials. There's probably thousands of them that I know absolutely nothing about.
What's the
Um,
technical advantage of using cryptocurrency to transfer in between banks?
well, because it's a public ledger, the bank can keep track very easily and quickly of where the money is actually going in real time,
Okay.
right? Whereas if you're relying on other kinds of transfers, especially on older mainframe systems, you can't get that information because the the advantage to a decentralized quorum based system, which you can use You can use other underlying technologies. Cryptography is fine. It's completely unnecessary. The advantage to that is that it's not batch processing. Decentralized systems don't do batch processing. Mainframes do batch processing, right?
So that's batch processing is when you're just doing like this amount of data, and then you go to this amount of data, and then you go to this amount of data.
No, it's worse. So batch processing, they shut the system down for regular transactions outside of certain windows to reconcile the books.
Oh, okay. Well,
right. So
I guess if
basically,
you have to do that.
in a normal, well, you have to see. This is the funny part. You have to do that eventually anyway, because at some point you have to call it, right?
Mhm.
You have to say like the value at this point is X, right? So you always have to do that. The option you didn't have that you have now with decentralized fast systems is that you can just do that whenever you want. Like you can either agree or not agree. You can just do it on a whim. Say, all right, we'll roll up the value of this. It happens not on Bitcoin because Bitcoin's like 10 minutes, but on a reasonably built system that's not coded by an idiot and reliant on cryptography for everything. You can do that within a couple seconds. So that's not so bad. But like if you actually wanted to know as a store how much money a particular store branch had made, you can't find that out until 3 a.m. And that's assuming the store closes at like 10 or something, right? And so there's an hour for local reconciliation, right? And counting, and then that number gets reported up, and then that number gets brought, right? And then all those numbers get brought up, and then there's a batch process that runs, that reconciles, and that reconciliation is done by 3 a.m. or whatever the time frame is. And then you have your number, right? Now you can do it at 10:01. You can, right? So if you ever watched the stock market, for real, if you've ever watched the stock market, what you're going to notice is it's called the settlement period. The bell rings to close the market. The numbers are still moving like crazy because the accounts are not settled. So there's a reconciliation period. I think it takes 30 minutes or something for the market, for the Dow. It might be less for the NASDAQ because the NASDAQ was always electronic. But it used to take quite a bit of time. And so that reconciliation would happen. And then you know what the value of all the stocks are, we'll say, for the next open. But you don't know until the reconciliation happens. That's batch processing. But ultimately you have to batch anyway at some point, at some layer. That's what, like, nobody understands it about banking. You'd have to go work at a bank like I did to learn this.
Well, it's like you call it batching, right? It just sounds like kind of actualizing potential at that point.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's you have to take the potential and actualize it and get all the eyes on it to look at the same place. Well, that's the reconciliation, right? Of the process. Once all the transactions have stopped and settled, they physically settle, they're no longer active, then you can peg the value again for the next trading day. Or the next, you peg the value.
However frequently you're doing it. Yeah.
Well, usually you do it weekly, monthly, and quarterly, right? That's usually how companies would do accounting pretty standardly. They'd have all of those batch periods involved. But like banking's endless, man. It's such a big industry, and people don't realize, how many aspects there are and how many things are going on and how much potential there is and how difficult it is. And that's why you can't just replace it with Bitcoin, which is a 10-minute settlement time on a transaction.
Yeah.
You're not going to take over credit cards with a 10-minute settlement time.
Right, especially because Visa runs like some obscene number, but like 2 million transactions a second or something like that.
Yep. 2 million closed transactions a second settled. It's so far beyond what any of the cryptos can do. Just technically, it's not even worth thinking about cryptos because the tech won't support those speeds at all. And all the tech that even gets close is not secured at the crypto level because at the end of the day, the group crypto decentralized algorithm has to take longer mathematically. There's no way around that. It's a trade-off. So Lightning Coin and all that nonsense, totally hackable. Totally. It's already been done. And there's a lot of papers about other ways you could do it. So they just lie about it. Basically, they just no, they can't do that. I'm like, oh no, they can totally do that. I don't know what you're smoking, but I could do that. It's not hard to hijack a network like that, because you're subverting the crypto the we rely on crypto rule to get the speed, because you have, it's a trade-off. You have to. Do you want it fast, or do you want 100% certainty on a closed transaction? You just can't do it any other way.
Well, yeah, baking. Turns out there's a lot of things that I don't know. But there is one thing I do know, is that it's gotten dark outside. And I think a rational creature would go to bed under such circumstances. Story time with Uncle Mark was once again fascinating. So I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. And we are about ready to wrap this up. So see you all next week. Good night, and God bless you all.